The adapter pattern. We were studying the adapter pattern as a part of this class. We looked at a very simple adapter which converts an array to a list, but that wasn't really meaty. Let's now look at an example which is much more substantive and will explain adapters in much greater detail. Also, the interesting thing about this example is that the adapter doesn't really look like boilerplate bridging code converting one interface to another. It's a very cleverly implemented adapter using all kinds of annotations and special classes. So let's go study tables in JavaFX, a more interesting example of an adapter. On to our more interesting example of adapters. Many languages have powerful support for visualizing data in the form of charts and tables. If you think about it, visual representation in this form allows us to absorb a lot more information than if we just saw data scrunched together in just text or with a little bit of structure. Tables and charts are pretty standard ways of representing complicated data sets which allow you to run insights or do analysis and so on and so forth. In Java, the new JavaFX framework has excellent table and chart support. JavaFX is in general a UI framework which allows a whole bunch of user interface code to be written, whether you want simple UI controls and whether you want complicated interactions with animations, transitions, etc. It also has excellent table and chart classes, which we'll look at shortly. Now, on one hand, you have a whole bunch of data, and on the other hand, you want to visualize it in a specific form, either a table or a chart. Now, both charts and tables tend to need data in a very specific format. In the case of tables, it's in rows and columns, and in the case of charts, if you imagine a simple line chart, it's as a series of points. These are specific things which tables and charts can interpret and then display on screen. However, think about the data that you have with you, which you might want to visualize in this manner. Data is almost never readily available in the form of rows or columns or points. You usually have data maybe as a series of objects which you have within Java or some other structure. Maybe you just have free text data. Maybe you have data input in the form of XML which you can reinterpret in the form of rows and columns. It could be in a list or a map of objects. These are the ways in which you typically have the data. What you need this data to be in is in the form of either rows and columns in the case of tables, or as a series of points if you're considering charts. Let's focus on tables for now and see what we need to do to bridge this gap between the data that we have available and the form that it needs to be in to visualize it in the form of tables. Now it's very obvious with this problem statement that we require to convert from lists, maps and other objects that we have available into rows and columns or points. It's also very clear that this requires the use of adapters. Adapters are what will help us convert what we have, that is objects, lists and maps, to what we want, which is data in the form of rows, columns or a series of points. Now, even within JavaFX, tables are a lot more extensible to use than charts. The JavaFX framework provides excellent adapters for tables. In fact, the adapters are so interesting that they don't really look like adapter code as you'd imagine it to be. Table support is fantastic in JavaFX. It's totally possible in a JavaFX table to wire up a list of objects to sit in a table very transparently. What does that mean? You can just say that I have these objects, they have a whole number of attributes which form the columns in one row, and I have these whole series of objects which form the rows in that table, completely transparently. You can also say that when I update this list backing the table itself should update. So if the list changes, the table will change with little effort. Now, the same thing is not available in the case of charts. Charts require you as a programmer to explicitly put in a bunch of effort to set up the points that will be displayed on it. You can have a whole number of charts, whether it's a bubble chart, a bar chart, or a line chart. But you have to do the work to convert your existing data to the data format which the chart requires it to be in. Adapters for tables are much more transparent and kind of clever. We'll see in a moment. The rendering of a table to screen is done via a class in JavaFX called TableView. This TableView class has a really good adapter setup. I've been doing a whole lot of build-up about the adapters which back the TableView. Let's just go ahead and explore this in some detail.